for your kind introduction, and I would like to thank Professor Shulamit Almong for inviting me to this stimulating international workshop in which I have learned a lot, the entire organizing committee for their work, and the previous lecturer, because much has been already said, and perhaps even better said. I would like to start my presentation by introducing at least a clarification which is necessary in order to understand specific references in my speech. I'm talking about the career system in Italy. And the first level in the career system in Italy is possibly a sort of postdoc position, so-called assegno di ricerca. Assegno di ricerca is a work as a research assistant for a specific project, and it is the closest position to a postdoc, and in fact it is becoming a postdoc, even though this has not been carried out in law. Then we have the position of a temporary lecturer, professore a contratto, so the possibility of being hired as professore a contratto, which is a temporary lecturer position, is usually to cover teaching needs, and this is also possible, but the main starting position for a career in Italian academia is usually that of ricercatore. Until a few years ago, this was a permanent position, the so-called ricercatori REU. This was changed by the Moratti reform in 2005 and more radically by the Gelmini reform in 2010. Nowadays, there are two types of contract, researcher type A and researcher type B, with different lengths and different prospects of career, but similar duties. Then there is the possibility of becoming a full associate professor, and in order to become associate professor, the candidate needs to pass a national competition and get idoneità or abilitazione on the basis of publications, which are evaluated with different bibliometric methods that are different for different sectors. And it is the same, the process to become full professor, and then you have to pass a local competition and be hired by the university. So after this preliminary indication, I get to the core of my speech. So if we consider the general situation in Italy as far as gender inequalities are concerned, I can mention the World Economic Forum report, which sees Italy ranked 117 out of 153. And relative to the national context, the data show that the female employment rate in Italy is very low, standing at 53.1%, and women appear to be involved in a limited range of employment areas compared to those available to men, and the areas with the highest female presence are less recognized in terms of social prestige and economically. The Gender Equality Index, elaborated by the European Institute for Gender Equality, which enables a relevant and striking comparison between the Italian situation and the situation of EU countries. So in 2020, the EU 28 average of the index is 67.9 out of 10, showing small improvements compared to the values of previous years. And in Italy, the estimated J value is 63.5. So in addition to experiences more precarious and irregular working conditions, women are underrepresented, as we have already heard this today, in management roles. The phenomenon of glass ceiling is still widespread in Italy, and as far as the gender gaps in the world of work are concerned, the phenomenon affects many areas, including university. Let's now consider the issue of gender equality in the context of Italian university within this set of measures known as azioni positive. According to the Article 42 of Decreto Legislativo, The positive actions consist of measures aimed at removal of obstacles that de facto present the realization of equal opportunities within the scope of state responsibility, and they are aimed at fostering the employment of women and achieving substantive equality between men and women at work. So what's the situation of the academia in Italy? As it has already been said for other different countries, it is widely documented that women are the majority of enrolled students and experience linear educational path, achieving better results than men. And based on data from the Italian Ministry of Education, University and Research as of 2021, women permanently make up more than half of the student population and raise more. The number of female graduates each year is higher than the number of male graduates. Women account for around 57%, just as the percentage of women graduating with a PhD degree is higher than that of men, over 50%. Yet, still in 2021, women occupying the position of full professor in the academy are only 24.8%. So is it a question of professional choices? Perhaps women are less interested than men in undertaking a university career? Not at all. In line with the European trend, moving from education to a university career, the number of women decreases as one moves up to a higher position. In Italy, according to the most recent dossier issued by Kuhn, the data apply to all the 14 areas of the so-called settori scientifico-disciplinari, that is to say academic fields, with a widening of the gap, as is well known, in the so-called STEM areas, that is to say science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. As anticipated, once university studies have been completed and the PhD degree eventually obtained, the ratio between the two genders is inverted and the presence of women becomes increasingly smaller as they progress to higher position. The gap starts right from the conclusion of the doctoral course. So after the so-called Riforma Gelmini, in fact, the point of discrimination has been lowered, and it is not unlike in the past in the advancement from the role of the researcher to that of associate professor, but in the very moment of access to the qualification of researcher type A or type B. So here you have some data. So if we take into consideration a broader time span, and so here I'm considering the period from 2008 to 2018, the data reveals some slight improvement, which should, however, be properly considered. Indeed, from 2012 to 2018, a gender rebalancing seemed to take place, starting from the lower levels of the university career. A short side remark. This very slight positive trend was interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Three researchers, Laura Inno, Alessandra Rotundi, and Arianna Picciali, analyzed the scientific production of the Italian astronomy community during the first 6 months of 2020 in search of any traces of an equal division of domestic work between the two genders, exacerbated in the period between March and June by the closure of school and the absence of compensatory care services. The result, published in the journal Nature Astronomy, is dramatically crystal clear. Research noted a general decrease in scientific production of 8%. Inno commented these decrease as follows. Women publish less, so the total decrease we see is solely due to the decrease in female production. Our idea is that this can be explained because as schools were closed and any kind of mobility was impossible, there was no possibility of having babysitters or help from grandparents. All the care of the home and children fell on the female researchers. So the difference in productivity is a kind of mirror of the unbalanced distribution of family workloads between the genders in the country and could be a serious obstacle in the process towards gender equality. And raise more women face greater obstacles than their male colleagues already in the transition from what could be defined as the phase of precariousness to the phase of recruitment, albeit this phase is again a temporary position. And so I'm talking about the role of researcher type A and type B. And this is well shown by the Glassdoor index introduced by Ilenia Picardi, which indicates the difficulty already in entering the academic career and considers the ratio between the percentage of women who carried out research activities in a precarious position and the percentage of those who benefit from an albeit temporary official access to the academic world. Therefore, even when the career starts with precarious work with a higher percentage of women than men, in fact, at the transition to the stabilization of job precariousness, the order is reversed and the percentage of men prevails. Women are not only penalized in the access, but also in the progress of their university career. The reasons can be summed up in a series of impediments, social, cultural, psychological, and structural, to which the very procedures of university recruitment were added until the so-called Gelmini reform. The combination of these factors determined and still determines, if not the abandonment of research and careers by women, at least horizontal and vertical segregation phenomena. By the former, I mean the already mentioned underrepresentation and presence of women in the higher position of the academic career, the so-called glass ceiling. And so here you can compare some data. We have 12,303 male full professor versus 2,952 female full professor, and so on and so forth. By vertical segregation phenomenon, I refer, on the contrary, to the overrepresentation permanence of women at lowest levels, so-called sticky floors. As a result, some areas of research and high academic positions are more or less dominated by men. In Labirinti di Cristallo, Labyrinth of Crystals, Picardi highlights how one of the problems lies in the fact that the concept of scientific excellence and meritocracy in academia are not neutral. They are defined, as you can read in the PowerPoint, on performance parameters that are strongly male stereotype, but to which women are called upon to adhere in order to demonstrate the validity of their work. However, a further specification introduced by Picardi is relevant, namely that it is not men who segregate women, but it is the whole structure, the academic institution made up of men and women, all the rules, all the organizational and symbolic practices, hence the whole culture that creates this type of segregation. In fact, as already told, many of the phenomena of segregation and even outright discrimination of women are operated by women themselves. And it would be impossible otherwise, because we have in Italy, we have a system that trains male and female researchers to a type of performance that follows standards based on typically male models. Let me explain. Some scholars have highlighted how the impact factor of an article assessed by counting the number of times other authors mention it in their work is disadvantaging for women. The citation system, in fact, suffers from an effect called same-sex citation. Researchers show a marked tendency, not exclusively in Italy, but strongly present in Italy, to cite publications whose authors are of the same sex. And as Ilenia Picardi again highlights, as long as bibliometric indicators remain the undisputed evaluation metrics for academia and research excellence, women will continue to face structural barriers to accessing funding and progression in academy. In this regard, I also mentioned the example of the VQR 2004-2010. VQR is the evaluation of research quality that evaluates the research outcomes of public universities, in which parental leaves was only taken into account for a total period of more than 2 years. This criterion affected the evaluation of the performance of women and womb with a physiological maternity maternity leave of 5 months and 1 year of reduced working hours for breastfeeding did not reach the 2 years of leave specified in the call. This episode clearly exemplifies the unreconciled work-life attitude generally prevalent in universities and research systems, which still has the effect of clearly discriminating against mothers and family carers in general. So I skip a part devoted to the women in university governance, and I will briefly present the situation of the University of Verona, the university in which I work. Verona is in the north of Italy, and this is important because we have a huge difference between the north and the south of Italy. And here you have some data. You have the total amount of the teaching staff, the number of female professors. So here, for example, full professor, the total amount of teaching staff and female professors, and the average age, and here the same for associate professor and researchers. So as you see, although my university is a university with a strong focus on gender policies, you can observe the rapid decrease in the percentage of women as institutional positions increase. You can see here the overall values of women and men out of the total teaching staff divided into field of research and development. So it is in English, so you have natural sciences, engineer, medical, and the health sciences, and here the different professor, full professor, associate professor, the old type of researchers, the new type of researchers. So the data are in line with the consideration that I have already introduced. What I want to show is that when we talk about the old kind of researchers, we have an imbalance in favor of women, but far from being a positive data, it shows the phenomenon of the sticky floors. So the average age is usually very high, and they have found an obstacle in their careers. I would also like to briefly mention the Comitato Unico di Garanzia is a committee for equal opportunities, employees' well-being and non-discrimination at work, CUG. It was established by an Italian law, so it is present in all the university, and it is a special university body which deals with issues relating to equal opportunities. So here you have the general goals of the CUG, so to propose actions and projects aimed to ensure that equal opportunities are fully implemented for those who work and study at the university and promote a culture of equality. And then there is, let's say, a sort of special section of the CUG, and it is the section of Politica di Genere, so the section which deals specifically with gender policies, and in particular, in this area, the objectives of the CUG include to implement gender balance policies between life and work, and the better organizational culture, to promote a proper recruitment and career advancement policy for research and administrative staff, to avoid horizontal segregation and gender asymmetries, to help remove the gender pay gap in the world of work. The CUG has recently drafted the first gender equality plan, which is part of the global vision of gender policies through an interrelation between the CUG's 3-year positive action plan, the gender balance report, the annual report on gender data, and the university strategic plan. This overall synergy is aimed at promoting the removal of gender inequalities in decision-making processes. So, what observed leads me to speculate that the model that looks at the crystal glass ceiling as a frontier to be conquered and broken may be misleading. Indeed, it would be important to shift the plane of analysis and problematization of gender inequalities to the sticky floors, glass door, and crystal labyrinths. That is to say, to the mechanism that regulates women's entry, permanence, and exit from, or rather abandonment of, academic path. Moreover, it would be also relevant to consider the specific configuration that the gender dimension assumes within academic institutions in the light of institutional, cultural, and organizational practices based on a presumed neutrality and universality, highlighting ambiguities and distortions that produce negative effect with respect to gender equity criteria. And I think I can stop here. Thank you for your attention.